Let's move down the street from the History Center to the Capitol. The governor said he might do it, and on Tuesday he did. He ordered a union election for home daycare workers who receive state subsidies. Fewer than half of home daycare centers meet that definition. Republicans were quick to challenge Governor Dayton, saying unionizing daycare would hike prices. Well, let's have a debate. Carol Nieders heads up SEIU Local 284, one of the unions trying to organize the home daycare centers. Cindy Cunningham is a St. Paul home daycare provider who opposes the effort. She works with the online group Childcare Unionization.com. Thank you both for coming down. Carol, let me start with you. What's the need for a union among this population?
There's a lot of things that are happening that are sort of under the wire that I don't think the public's aware of. Right now, and for many years, the number of children on the waiting list to actually have daycare has been growing, and right now we're at 6,400. And so that, amongst concerns around not having access to training and improvements within their profession or say in some of these things as they happen, is really caused this movement to grow, not only in Minnesota, but across the country.
Cindy, what are your main worries about unionization?
I believe that people have the right to unionize and to organize, but under this unionization process, there is no labor law afforded to it, and so even though it's under the Bureau of Mediation Services, there still is no federal or state labor law that applies to it. So there's no protection or process decertification or anything like that that's available to us. And it's the whole process where we've often ended up in the situation where it's union organizers or providers that are being paid for by the union that are the ones that are speaking for the union. I myself am a provider in St. Paul. I work with a coalition of providers that have been doing this for 6 years to try to educate the public, and we receive no funds. We receive nothing other than we are just providers trying to move forward the voice. The needs for subsidy to me has been misconstrued as far as how we are paid, and that's our income. That's how it's often presented, is that the subsidy is our income for our home daycares, and that's not true.
This is pretty confusing to some people here. Carol, we're talking about, if I understand this correctly, about half of the 11,000 eligible home child care workers would be able to, are included in this unionization vote. Is that correct?
Licensed, subsidized, that's correct.
It's talking state subsidized daycare, right? But under terms of this, they'd be able to opt out, right? And being part of the union would be voluntary. So really, what's the point?
Well, I think that we've been able to do things already, and as we continue to grow our organization and grow their union, providers will be able to make the changes within that profession that they've been striving for. Cindy says for 6 years. I would say that we've been talking to folks in Winona who have no access to training, and we're able to make that happen. During the state's shutdown, another example of some of the things that we've been able to do that hadn't been there before was we actually intervened where a number of associations and other nonprofits tried to get providers recognized as essential and the subsidy so that care could continue to needy families.
A stronger voice, you think?
Yeah, a stronger voice and a seat at the table. There was a change that required I believe it was shaken baby syndrome training a while back, and providers didn't even know until right before it was actually going to be implemented that change happened. The communication is just, it's terrible. The providers work in isolated, one individual in a home.
But there's a Minnesota Licensed Daycare Association?
There is, and the 6 years that I'm referring to is that there's a group of providers that have worked for 6 years to stop the unionization, not to deal with the professionalism of providers.
Is your voice not being heard? Or?
The voice really gets lost in the power of, in my opinion, in the power of the union, both in money and in time and effort. We can't go door to door. We can't try to make sure that these voices are put out there. And when things are put out, such as that during the shutdown, the child care subsidy, there were approximately 7 agencies and organizations that were already filed to try to make this an essential service prior to the unions. AFSCME, which is what I would be under, actually was at least a couple days after even discussing it with us, because they had to go to the head AFSCME organization to find out if they could enter into the government shutdown process with us. So we find that some of this power...
Let me just clarify something. So there were more than 7, I believe, that tried to intervene, and none of those were heard. None of those motions were heard.
That's not...
That's true. It's by court record. Check it out, right?
No.
So I'm not sure where you received your information.
This is often what we end up...
But we were the only organization that was heard, and after we were heard, there was a ruling by the judge in the hearing that this was an essential service. And I also want to correct one other misconception.
Go ahead quickly, because I have a question to ask you.
Cindy referred to the Minnesota Childcare Association, the statewide association, as being the voice for providers. I find it interesting that we've been organizing for 6 years. I believe the association has been around a lot longer than that. Right? And in that time, we have over half of all of the providers that have signed cards to form a union. I believe, last I heard, the membership in the association is just a little, several hundred.
Quick response.
That's a lot of providers without a voice.
Go ahead.
You know, this is again is what we end up in. When you talk about the cards that have been signed, we have a multitude of personal stories from providers where the strong arming of the organizers who have come into our homes, I personally shooed them away. I have personal friends who, when the organizers came to their homes, walked into their homes, interrupted things that were going on, had them sign cards. I have a friend who
And you don't feel the need for a union?
Absolutely not.
I want to ask you, why is Governor Dayton involved in this? Why would he even want to step into this? Is this political payback for his union support?
No, there is no way for a provider. Cindy is right in that this is not under PALRA law. This is not under NLRB. This is only and only can be done by executive order, and has been done in 15 other states.
And I don't
so this
think
is
that
not
makes
new.
It right.
This is a
Doesn't make it
movement
right.
that's moving across the country.
The
We are in a
unionization
crisis.
doesn't make it right.
We're in a
to
crisis
do that.
for childcare.
And that is doing it. I don't even get a chance to talk, but that is doing it is against law. It says in CCAP subsidy that we're not employees. How do we become unionized? We have no process. I met with him. I was in a group. We said, what do we do when we have problems with the union if there's no labor law? We'll come talk to him. I'm not sure what he's going to be able to do.
He meaning, I'm sorry,
the governor.
Okay.
We're somehow supposed to go to him to get help with the governors. So first I have problems with that he's involved. That we have been told by union organizers that it is payback. That's what I was directly told. So.
All right. We have to end it here because clearly we're out of time, but
Vote
this is a big
next
issue.
month.
Thank you
Vote
so much.
If you have to vote.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.